Hey, podcast friends. This is Dr. Steve Hewlett with the podcast, Simple Healthy Choices for Weight Loss, where every week we help people who have realized that as their health has been declining over the years, the number of medications they are being prescribed is increasing. We want to help you reverse this health path so you can live the vibrant, pain-free, and hopefully medication-free life you deserve to live. If you'd like even more information on this topic, you can go to Amazon or Audible and pick up my book, Your Plate is Your Fate. And if you think my book helps you on your new health path, please tell your friends and leave a review where you purchased it. Welcome back, podcast friends. And in today's episode, this, like some of our past episodes, this is in response to some questions that we've been getting asked. And one thing that evidently I do that I wasn't aware of is through my podcast, sometimes I'll say intermittent fasting, and sometimes I'll say time-restricted eating. And so people have asked me what the difference is between those two. And now granted, it's very, very subtle difference. And some people don't even distinguish between them. But basically, I want you to understand the whole reason behind intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating is, again, trying to keep your insulin levels low. Like all my podcasts talk about, most of the diseases that we have today seriously are because of having too high insulin levels and having inflammation throughout our bodies. And both of these are caused mainly by the types of food that we eat, which is the man-made, ultra-processed food that you get in the inner lines of the grocery stores, everything in box, bottles, bags, and cans, because all that stuff is made with the same three horrible ingredients. It's ultra-processed carbohydrates that are basically get broken down to just strictly glucose, the vegetable and seed oils, which are extremely inflammatory to your body for a few different reasons. And I did a whole podcast just on that. And then also because they put sugar and high fructose corn syrup in everything. And sugar and high fructose corn syrup, which is the same thing, except for a little bit difference in the fructose, they're both percentages of glucose and fructose. And both of these are a double whammy. The glucose portion goes over to the part of the ultra-processed food, which causes more glucose to be in your blood, which causes your insulin levels to be high, which causes you to have insulin resistance, which causes you to become obese and type 2 diabetics and have high blood pressure and have Alzheimer's and have cardiovascular disease and have high cholesterol levels, and just everything is caused by these things. So the key to all this is keeping your insulin levels low and keeping your glucose levels low at the same time. And as I've said through many of my podcasts, the way we treat type 2 diabetes before 1960 is totally different from how we treat type 2 diabetes now. Before that, or 60, 70, right in there, we knew to treat type 2 diabetes with our nutrition, because we knew that it was nutrition that caused us to be there in the first place. Eating too many carbohydrates, having too high blood glucose caused our insulin levels go up, and that caused insulin resistance. However, since that time, we have found that drug companies don't look at the high insulin levels and high drug and glucose levels. They only look at the high glucose levels. And so they try to decrease your glucose by stimulating your insulin, which actually makes type 2 diabetes worse. And so the whole thing with time-restricted eating and intermittent fasting is trying to keep your insulin levels low. And there's different ways that you can do this. Obviously, the number one most important thing is to stay away from carbohydrates. And I mean, especially ultra-processed carbohydrates that are in your box, bottles, bags, and cans. But even God made carbohydrates like vegetables and fruit. These also can raise your glucose, but it's not as high. You don't have to worry about it. You get other vitamins, things with this. You just don't want to eat a lot. You know, a few vegetables is fine. Even less fruit is fine. But really, for a good, healthy nutrition, what you really want to do is focus on the protein, focus on the meat, focus on the fat that's in the meat, especially if it's a grass-fed, grass-finished beef that has a very good omega-3 to omega-6 ratio in it, which means you're giving yourself anti-inflammatories and yada, yada. I've done other podcasts on this. But so by far, if you want to keep your blood glucose low, the first thing you need to do is decrease or eliminate carbohydrates from your nutrition plan. The other thing is decreasing stress. Stress is extremely important. You need not stress, but like if you have a fight or flight, saying you're getting ready to be attacked or something, then that sets your body into a fight or flight mode. You're stressed out. You've got to hurry up and you've got to either fight something or you've got to run. So your body will produce cortisol from your adrenal glands, little gland on top of your kidneys. That goes to your pancreas, and that causes you to actually put glucose into the system, or pancreas stimulates glucagon. Glucagon stimulates the liver to start putting glucose into the bloodstream. Once the glucose goes in the bloodstream, your insulin gets secreted, and now it uses that glucose for quick energy, so you can get away from whatever that stressful situation is. But what you're supposed to do is, after that situation's gone, you've killed the lion, you've ran away from the attacker or whatever. Once that stress is gone, now your glucose levels drop back down. And so now your insulin levels drop back down. That's the way it's supposed to be. But when you are stressed all the time, no matter what that stress is, it could be a job, it could be a relationship, it could be anything. When you don't learn how to handle stress appropriately and you continue to stay stressed all the time, you're continuously causing cortisol to be released. You're continuously keeping your glucose and your insulin levels high. And cortisol does a lot of bad things around the body. It's good if you just have it just for those spikes of fight or flight, but when it's all around all the time, there's a lot of detrimental effects. Same thing with insulin. Insulin and glucose are great for the fight or flight type situation, but they're supposed to come down, and you're not supposed to be using glucose for your energy source anymore. That's when you're supposed to be using the fat out of your fat cells, but you can't do it when your insulin levels are high. And I've done a whole podcast on that as well, about how exactly high insulin levels cause you to store fat and you cannot burn it. But if you decrease your insulin levels, that causes you to actually burn your fat from your subcutaneous fat cells and use that for your energy source instead of storing it. So there's so many reasons why you need to keep your insulin levels low. But so decreasing carbs, decreasing your stress, increasing your quality of sleep is extremely important too. People who brag on how they can go on only 3 or 4 hours of sleep is incorrect. And they have no idea what they're doing, the damage they're doing to their bodies, to their brains, to their organs, to everything. Sleep, so many good things happen to your body when you're sleeping, that a good quality sleep is paramount to having a good, healthy lifestyle. When you don't have good quality sleep, that automatically puts your body in a stressful situation. And now, since you didn't sleep overnight, you're going to be stressed all the way throughout the day, which again leads into all the other issues we've been dealing with. So besides decreasing carbs, decreasing stress, increasing your quality of sleep, the other way of keeping your insulin levels low is by using intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating. And that's the main thing of what I wanted to tell you about. Basically, time-restricted eating and intermittent fasting are basically the same way. What they're saying is you have 24 hours in a day. What we have been told by the food companies who fund these studies that tell other people, so-called professionals, that we should be eating small meals every 3-4 hours, 5 to 6 times a day. This is not true. This is a lie. This sells a lot of ultra processed carbohydrates, which keep you hungry all the time. And so that's why they say this. But that actually is a horrible way to do it, because when you eat all through the day, you keep your insulin levels high all through the day. And I'll talk a little bit about why that's horrible for you. But so you do not do that. What you actually would like to do is this time-restricted eating or this intermittent fasting. And that means that out of the whole 24 hours of the day, you pick like a 6 to 8 hour time period, whichever 6 to 8 hour time period works for you, and you eat all your meals in that short 6 to 8 hour time frame. That leaves the whole other 16 to 18 hours to be able to keep your insulin levels low and to be burning the fat out of your fat cells and use that for your energy source. So you become a fat burner instead of a carb burner for your energy. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to get you to go back to the way our bodies worked before our dietary guidelines came out in 1977, where they started telling everybody that fat was bad for you and fat, you eat all this low fat, no fat diet. And by doing that, everybody started eating carbs. And once they started eating carbs and getting their insulin levels high, all of the disease states that you can possibly think of really started skyrocketing that time. Obesity rates skyrocketed, type 2 diabetes, blood pressure problems, Alzheimer's, skin conditions, cancer. About any disease that you can think about really either began or really started skyrocketing right after our dietary guidelines came out in 1977. So this is a way that you can start reversing all those issues that you may have, and probably do have some of these. Even if you don't have high blood glucose, chances are if you're eating carbohydrates, you are insulin resistant. You are starting to become insulin resistant, because you could be insulin resistant for 5, 10, 20 years before you actually start seeing your blood glucose rise. And so the whole deal with the intermittent fasting, time restricted eating, is to eat your meals in a short time period and let all the rest of the time for your insulin levels to come down and be low like it's supposed to be. So your glucose will be level because you're not eating. Your insulin levels will be low because you're not eating. Now, this may freak a lot of people out because they're like, oh my gosh, I couldn't go 16 to 18 hours without eating. But you find out when you eat good, healthy, natural, whole, real, God-made food, which basically means meat and fat, a little bit of vegetables, and even less fruit, and you stay away from the man-made food, you will stay full for much, much longer. And I've done a podcast on these already too. But basically, that kind of food, when you eat real meat with real animal fat and just a little bit, few vegetables, a little less fruit, this food stays in your intestines or stays in your stomach for a longer period of time. Then when it does go into your intestines, then your intestines release hormones that are stimulated by the presence of protein in your gut and the presence of fat in your gut. Those two things are what stimulate these hormones. Carbohydrates do not stimulate these hormones. But these two hormones, called peptide YY and cholecystokinin, those are stimulated by protein and fat in your intestines. And both peptide YY and cholecystokinin go to the medial hypothalamus in your brain and tell you, I'm not hungry. Don't eat anymore. So they actually, as that protein and fat goes all through your intestine, it's continuously stimulating this. So it's continuously making you feel full. So you don't want to eat. You don't need to eat. Because the other thing that makes you hungry is when you're hungry, it's because your body wants nutrition. When you eat man-made, ultra-processed food in the box, bottle, bag, or can, you are not giving your body the nutrition it needs. So that's another reason why when you eat that stuff, you are hungry all the time. You're constantly reaching for more cookies, crackers, chips, soda pop, fruit juice, fast food restaurants, pizza, takeout delivery, all that stuff. You're reaching for the same stuff over and over because you're never full. Your body isn't getting the nutrients it needs. You're not stimulating peptide YY and cholecystokinin. There's so many different reasons why this type of food keeps you feeling hungry. But when you're talking about time restricted eating, intermittent fasting, if you combine that with eating basically a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, where you just eat meat, or you just eat meat with just very little fruits, very little vegetables, and stay away from all the ultra-processed man-made food, you will be full for long periods of time. So that will allow you to eat all your meals in a 6 to 8 hour period, go to 16 to 18 hours without food. Now, remember, you're going to be sleeping for part of this. So let's just say if you're doing it right, you stop your last meal about 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed. So there's 4 hours there. Say you sleep a good amount of sleep, like you should, 8 hours. Now you have 8 hours of sleep, 4 hours before you went to sleep. You're already 12 hours into it. All you have to do is skip your breakfast. Just push that off just about another 4 hours, and then you can open up your window. And for the next 6 to 8 hours, that's when you want to eat. And then you're going to close your window 6 to 8 hours later, and then go the rest of the time where you won't eat anything, but you can still have plenty of water, plenty of unsweetened coffee, unsweetened tea, and that's all you're going to have for the rest of the time. And the whole key, again, is keeping your insulin levels low. Now, for the topic of this whole podcast is, what is the difference between intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating? The only difference, and it's a subtle difference, but again, it goes back to the insulin. With intermittent fasting, we are saying that you can eat all the food that you're going to eat in a 6 to 8 hour time period. The difference is with intermittent fasting, people eat all the way through that 6 to 8 hour time period. They may eat something every hour, every 2 hours. You still need to be careful. You still want to stay away from all the ultra processed carbs forever, always. You should never eat that stuff. It's poison. It's killing you. But even that, you don't want to keep your insulin levels up that entire time of the 6 to 8 hours, you'd really like to have it eat a meal at the beginning of that window and then wait 6 to 8 hours and then eat a meal at the end of that window. That is time restricted eating. To where intermittent fasting, you're eating all the way through that 6 to 8 hour time period. Now, again, if you're eating good food all the way through that, it may not be that big of a deal, okay? Which you should be doing anyway. So if you're eating the types of food that keep your insulin levels low, then you could probably eat all the way through. But what you're going to find out is if you're eating the types of food that keep your insulin levels low, like eating good quality animal meat, good quality animal fat, you're going to find that you're not going to want to eat all the way through that 6 to 8 hour time period because you're not hungry. When you eat this way, again, there's several different reasons why this type of eating actually makes you feel full for much longer. And you'll be able to find that as you go on, as you start doing this, if you intermix a ketogenic diet or carnivore diet along with time restricted eating, you have just magnified the success that you're going to be able to get. It's going to happen so much quicker. And it's going right because one, and this is not a weight loss. This isn't a diet. This is a lifestyle change. This is saying, go back to eating the way we did back in the 1940s and 1950s. And before that, just don't eat the way they told us to after 1977. But when you do this, you are going to feel great. Your weight will come down, but that's just a positive side effect of eating healthy, because that's what eating healthy means. You use your fat for your energy source, not carbohydrates. So you will eat the fat out of your fat cells. Your weight will come down. Your body will reshape. But if you're doing all this, if you're getting good quality sleep, if you're eating a time restricted eating with a carnivore or ketogenic type diet where you just eat protein, fat, and few vegetables and fruits, when you do that, you are going to feel amazing. You're going to find out that you have a ton of energy. You're going to find that you think clear. You're going to feel better all through the day. You're not going to get tired around noon or whatever. And you're going to be feeling full. So you're not worried constantly about where you're going to eat, what are you going to eat, all that kind of stuff. You save yourself so much time because you're only eating once or twice a day. And when you eat those meals, they're not these great, big, elaborate meals. Just all you need is meat. Like I said, my wife and I, what we'll do a lot of times if we're out and we're running around and we want to get something to eat, we can go to a barbecue restaurant and we'll just eat off the a la carte menu. I'll get a pound of pulled pork. My wife will get a pound of smoked turkey, and that's it. We'll drink water or unsweet iced tea. No, we don't need any of those sides. And you're finding when you do this, it's cheaper to eat that way than it is to buy one of these dinners where you don't get very much meat and you're getting mostly the carbs. That's what most of these sides are, carbohydrates, which are exactly what you don't want to do. So that's the difference. Both intermittent fasting and time restricted eating, you're eating all your meals in a 6 to 8 hour time period. With intermittent fasting, people eat all the way through that time period. With time restricted eating, you eat once at the beginning and once at the end. And some people, I included, a lot of times only eat just one meal a day. That's all you need. You're never hungry because you're eating good, healthy food. And by doing this, it's way, way cheaper to eat healthy than it is to eat all this constant stuff, that man-made food. It's much cheaper, and it is so freeing as far as your time because you're not worried all day long. What am I going to eat? Where am I going to eat? And all this kind of stuff. You don't have to worry about it. Going to the grocery store and buying your food. I highly recommend do not buy food from your grocery stores. Buy supplies, buy your cleaning materials and all that kind of stuff. But if you're going to buy food, the actual real food that has nutrients in it, you really try to, if there's any way, try to go to a farmer's market, get your meat from a local farmer, get your eggs from the local farmer, get everything, get your fruits and vegetables from local farmers. And when you do that, you're going to find that fruits and vegetables are seasonal. You're not supposed to have strawberries in December. You don't have all these fruits and vegetables all year long, what you see in the grocery stores. That's unnatural. And there's a reason why it's unnatural. And that's all part of also why we are getting sicker and sicker. When you go to a farmer's market, you get from a farm, that is fresh seasonal fruit. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. So do yourself a huge favor and try to do that. And so why? Why are we trying to keep our insulin levels low? There are so many different reasons because high insulin levels are very dangerous to our body. It's horrible. It's destructive to our body in several different ways. One of the biggest ones that everybody has trouble with is high blood pressure. And if you have high blood pressure, chances are 95% of the patients with high blood pressure are insulin resistant, even if their blood glucose are normal. If you continue the way you're going, your blood glucose will be going up, and your blood pressure is going to be getting worse. You're going to increase your chance of getting Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, everything else. So I did an entire podcast, this podcast number 12, that just talks, the whole podcast is just how do carbohydrates cause high blood pressure? So you can go listen to that. But just as a real quick understanding, one, you have a hormone called aldosterone, which is called an antidiuretic hormone, because what normally what a diuretic does, like if you take a diuretic medication, one of the ways that one class of diuretics work is they cause your kidneys to release sodium. So as sodium goes through your kidneys and you excrete it, that pulls water along with it. That's why it's called a diuretic. Aldosterone is an antidiuretic hormone. So when your aldosterone levels are high, you actually cause sodium to be reabsorbed from your kidneys back in your blood, which means you're pulling fluid from your kidneys back into your blood. So just the fact that you keep your insulin levels high, you're also going to be increasing your blood pressure because you're keeping the sodium, you're reabsorbing that from the kidneys. So that's just one way. The other way is high insulin levels actually cause a narrowing of your blood vessels, because think of what you want. Think of it like a water going through a garden hose versus water going through like a sewer pipe, okay? If you've got water coming through a garden hose and you've got this, or it's like a sewer pipe, and the water may just be trickling out of the bottom of the sewer pipe. However, if that sewer pipe shrinks all the way down, same water pressure coming out, but you shrink that sewer pipe down to just a little garden hose, now that water is going to shoot out the end. And that's what you want. So if you are in a fight or flight situation, you want to narrow your blood vessels so you can have more blood pressure that's be going to your heart so it can beat faster, your lungs so they can breathe faster, your skeletal muscles so they can run faster. So that's what you're wanting. But when you're not in fight or flight, you don't want high insulin levels. It's causing this narrowing of your blood vessels. The other thing, just the fact that insulin is coming in contact with your blood vessels, it caused the lining of the blood vessel to thicken. So again, if you go back to the garden hose, think of a garden hose, but what would happen if there was something in that plastic that, say, it absorbed water and it started getting thick. So as the thickening of the outer part of that garden hose gets thicker, that means the hole in the middle gets more and more narrow, which again, this also leads to all kinds of stagnant blood, which means you can get blood clots. It causes decreased blood flow, and it's decreasing the oxygen that get into those end organs. So you want your blood vessels clean. You want your blood vessels to be able to dilate, and insulin goes against both of those. The other one, when you dilate these blood vessels, another big thing that your blood vessels produce is called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is your own body's antihypertensive, okay? So you want nitric oxide. We've already talked about how fructose blocks nitric oxide. So that's why fructose is poison. Stay away from sugar, stay away from high fructose corn syrup. However, when the other thing is nitric oxide is produced by the endothelial lining, the middle lining of your blood vessels. When you damage these blood vessels by thickening them with high insulin levels, you decrease your nitric oxide production. So now you have narrowed blood vessels, you have thickened blood vessels, and you've decreased nitric oxide, so your blood vessels won't dilate. So when your heart beats, it gets increased pressure, and that's where the hypertension comes from. So all that's from insulin. The other thing from insulin is, if you've heard about some of my other podcasts, when you fill your fat cells, when you fill a fat cell, that fat cell produces a substance called leptin. Leptin is a hormone that goes up to the medial hypothalamus in your brain, and it tells your brain, stop eating, I'm not hungry anymore, okay? However, they found that insulin also blocks the effects of leptin. So just the fact that you're eating a high carbohydrate meal, when leptin gets secreted from your fat cells to tell you that you're full and to stop eating, insulin blocks that. So that's another way that you stay hungry all the time, besides the fact of keeping high leptin levels because of having too much fat on your body, also called leptin resistance of the hypothalamus. So both of those are reasons why you're hungry all the time. The other thing insulin does is it forces you to convert excess glucose into fat. So when you have glucose, remember your body is trying to get rid of it at all costs. Your insulin level is it's excreting the glucose out through your kidneys. It's storing the glucose in your muscle cells. It's actually turning the glucose into fat to store it in your fat cells. It's storing the glycogen. So you have your glycogen stores in your liver for glucose. It's doing everything it can to get glucose out of the bloodstream because it doesn't want that. But again, your body doesn't want high insulin levels also. So the key is to keep both your glucose levels down and also to keep your insulin levels down. So this is the way to do it. Eat the foods that do not stimulate insulin. Fat does not stimulate insulin at all. If you have a good fat from a good grass-fed, grass-finished beef, you're getting all the micronutrients, all the minerals, vitamins and minerals out of that fat. You're getting all the amino acids that a human body needs to grow, heal, thrive, and survive. And you're not stimulating insulin. Protein, the meat will stimulate just a tiny bit, and the fat doesn't stimulate it at all. The carbohydrates stimulate it a lot, and especially these ultra-processed carbohydrates. So if you keep your carbohydrates low, you're also going to keep your insulin levels low. And that's the key to intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating. So the key is eat all your meals in a 6 to 8 hour window. And it may take you a while to do this. It's going to take, if you're a strong carbohydrate burner for your energy source, it'll take a little while, but it won't take very long. I mean, like it could take less than a week. It could take, a couple of weeks. But if you start eating this way, you're going to find out that you are not hungry. When you eat good, healthy animal meat, along with fruits and vegetables and the fat, and you stay away from these carbohydrates, you're going to find that you are not hungry. And this is where you really want to be. And you're going to see how much better you start feeling. So if you're doing time-restricted eating, you're only eating a couple meals at the beginning of your window and at the end of it. Intermittent fasting, you're kind of eating all the way through. Not the best way to do it, but as long as you stick with just, protein and fat, when you're eating in between there, it's not going to be that bad. But once you do this and you combine that with what we call the good news, that's NEWS, that's good nutrition, good exercise, good water, and good sleep. When you combine all those, you are going to feel amazing. So that's the difference. I know it was kind of wordy, but that's really about the only difference between intermittent time-restricted eating, but it all has to do with keeping your insulin levels low. So good luck. If you have any questions, please message us on Facebook, however you want to message on Instagram, however you want to get a question to us, get it to us, and I'll do a podcast or I'll respond back to you and just answer your question. So that's all I've got for today. So again, thank you so much for listening and have a great week. And remember, make simple, healthy choices to live a quality life. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button below and be sure to tell someone else who may want to change their health path as well. And don't forget, you can also purchase my book, Your Plate is Your Fate, on Amazon or Audible. And if you do, please leave a review.